In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. True light, that gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me.' Out of his fullness, we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known."
Hello, and welcome to the final event of this year's Events Week. We're the Christian Union, and it's really good to see you here this evening. My name's Imi. I'm a second-year MMLer at Homerton.
And I'm Wesley, second-year PBS at Trinity.
And we're your hosts for this evening.
So, Imi, what is the Christian Union, and what is Events Week?
Yeah, so the Christian Union is a group of people who seek to make Jesus' name known in our colleges and around Cambridge. And this year, each year, we put on a week of events to kind of answer the questions of life, and we have a speaker each year. Yeah.
Brill. And what's the theme for this year?
So this year's theme is home, and this year we have Matt Waldock, who's the co-pastor of City Church Manchester. But yeah, we'll get to know him a little bit more later on in the evening.
Great. And just for a few practical points, if you need the bathroom at any point, the toilets are just through those doors there and upstairs. In terms of fire exits, we're not expecting a fire, but there is the main entrance that you came in through, and then there's that door over there. But yeah, now that all that stuff is out the way with, we're going to kick off with a quick game, but I'll let Imi introduce that.
Yes. So given that it is Valentine's Day, I thought it would only be appropriate to introduce a game that includes Cambridge's most famous way of confessing love via Crashbridge. So tonight we're going to be playing a game where you have to guess whether it is a Taylor Swift lyric or a quote from a Crashbridge. So each round you get a point for guessing the correct answer, and you get a bonus point if you know the T-Swizzle lyric. No, the T-Swizzle song. So if you can keep track of your points, that would be great. Let's start with the first one. I'll still be here, here to stay. I'm yours forever, forever and a day. Feel free to chat in your tables. Any guesses? Does anyone think they know the answer? Crush Bridge is correct. And here is the full Crush Bridge. Absolute poetry, this.
Straight poetry.
Okay. Should we get the game rolling? Let's keep it going. Don't put me in the basement when I want the penthouse of your heart. Wow. Okay, any guesses? Bejeweled is correct. That means you get 2 points. That's amazing. Okay, what's the next one? The planets and the fates and all the stars aligned. You and I ended up in the same room. I'm not going to sing any of these, by the way. No. Any guesses? Mastermind is correct. There we go. Okay, can we have the next one? There's a special star that shines each time I hear that lullaby. I was going to say, you can get triple points if you come up and sing it. Okay, any final guesses? Crush Bridge is correct. There we go. What absolute poetry. These are quite intense. The lights were dim, but our future was bright. That gets like 10 points. So good. There's like millions that happen each day. I don't know how she knows. Okay, any guesses? Any guesses? Crush Bridge is correct, and this is quite a long one. Anyway, moving on. I don't even dare to wish it, but your eyes are flying saucers from, not saucers, saucers from another planet. Any final guesses? And that is correct. You got it right. Let's go. Okay, I think, is that the last one? Or is there one more? That is the last one. Okay. If you got more than 3 points, put your hands up.
More than 3 points?
More than 3 points.
Okay.
If you got more than 5 points, put your hands up.
More than 5?
Any more than 7 points, keep your hands up. 8 points. 9 points.
Wow.
10 points. 11 points? I actually don't know. So I think there were 6 examples, and 3 of them, I think the most you could get is 10. So I don't know how you guys got 11, but well done. Yeah, exactly. Okay, congratulations to that table over there.
Well
But moving on.
Yeah, moving on. We're going to invite Matt up, who's been speaking to us these last few evenings, and we've been learning a little bit about him over the course of the week. We've heard some very interesting facts. One of which was that you were part of a ninja brotherhood in Vietnam.
Very true. I was part of a ninja brotherhood. That is right.
Yeah. So if you want to hear more about that, do definitely chat to Matt at the end. We also heard that you earned a Blue Peter badge.
I did. Probably one of the great achievements of my life. A Blue Peter badge. That is true.
Yeah. And do you have any other fun, interesting facts besides? Because those are 2 pretty top tier facts.
They are pretty top tier facts. I think if I had to go with one more, I think next to my great achievement of a Blue Peter badge, and you can tell yourself whether it's higher or lower than that, is I'm married, and thank you. Is that higher or lower than a Blue Peter badge? Depends how you feel about Valentine's, right? I was kind of curious as well to know how many people here were invited as part of a Valentine's date.
What dreams are made
And if that is you, then whoever invited you is an absolute keeper. That's what I'm going to say. And I got to say that from the perspective of when I proposed to my wife, I proposed over ice cream. So this is actually quite romantic for me.
Nostalgia.
Although she's not here, so, you know. It's not perfect, but it's good.
Yeah. Oh, great. Could you tell us a little bit about what we'll be looking at tonight?
Yeah. So what we're going to be looking at tonight is the topic of shame. It's a deep issue, but it's an issue that affects all of us one way or another. And we're going to be exploring through, I think, one of the most fascinating stories at the end of John's Gospel. What do we do with shame? And is there any hope if we have it?
That sounds really good. So we'll turn to John's Gospel now, so feel free to take a seat. You should have copies of John's Gospel on your table, so do open that up. We'll be looking at chapter 21, and you can find that on page 62. That's page 62. John 21, starting at verse 1. Afterwards, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. "I'm going out to fish," Simon Peter told them, and they said, "We'll go with you." So they went out and got into the boat. But that night, they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some." When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment round him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciple followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 meters. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, Bring some of the fish you have just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they'd finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me."
With you, and it's great to be able to spend some time unpacking what I think is going to be a brilliant story. And the books, the John's Gospels books that you've got in your hands, they are for you. That is a gift from the Christian Union. Take them away, read them, look into them. But we're going to be spending some time looking at that particular story. And we're going to look at this subject of what does Jesus say when home is a place of shame in 4 ways. We're going to first look at what this theme is and explore the theme of shame. Then we're going to do an overview of the passage, an overview of the story. And then we're going to zoom in and look at the key part of the story, the key idea that's at the heart of the story. And then fourthly, I want to apply it to us tonight. So come with me to our very first point. Why shame is such a destructive emotion. Why shame is such a destructive emotion. Now, come with me back in my past to when I was around about 8 years old. And my friend Chris was coming to my house just to kind of hang out. You know, we were just going to do some fun stuff. It was going to be very casual, very, just fun with friend. But Chris arrived at my house with a pot. And in this pot was his entire collection of fossils. Okay. And I don't know why he brought them, but he brought them. And he came into the house, and he's holding it tight. And he kind of undoes the lid, and he lets me kind of have a look at the fossils, and he puts the lid back on. And we're doing all sorts of games, we're having all sorts of fun, but he's got this pot of fossils in his hands, and he will not let go. I don't even care about those stupid rocks. Apologies if any geologists are in here. I don't. I have no interest whatsoever. But something in me wanted that pot of fossils. He's holding onto it really tight, and I want it. Anyway, we're having a great time. We get into a game when I'm chasing him, and I see my opportunity. He's running fast. I'm faster. And he gets to a point where I know that he's slightly off balance. That's the moment. That's the moment. I'm smart. I got it. And what I do is I give him a push. And it's like a ballet in slow motion. He's going over. The pot pops from his hand. Up it is, everything's in slow motion, it feels like in that moment. And then down comes this pot of fossils onto the floor. Smash. Dust. And suddenly, I'm in panic. What have I done? Chris is in tears as he's kind of sweeping up what's left of these bits of rock and dust. And I am in total panic. And it's at the point where the doorbell goes and his dad is at the door. Now, there's something that you need to know about Chris's dad. Chris's dad is massive. He's so big, he's the type of person who could eat Dwayne Johnson and you probably wouldn't notice. He's a big guy. But the thing that you really need to know about Chris's dad is a police officer. And my heart is panicking. And so I could do, the only thing that I could get in my head to do was run up to my bedroom and hide. Because I'm absolutely convinced that the police are going to arrest me for breaking my friend Chris's fossil rock collection. And in that moment, I am feeling shame. I am feeling the weight of it. I am the worst human being in the world. And I vowed to myself in that moment, and you'll be pleased to hear I did not get arrested for the police that day. I'm actually just on parole, and they've allowed me to come to Cambridge. I'm still doing my time for that. I vowed to myself as a kid, I can't wait to be an adult, because when I'm an adult, I'll never have to feel shame again. Problem is, I've been a grown-up for a while now, and I still feel shame. It's just not true. You see, we kind of think that we live in a time, a modern time, where many of the things that were previously considered to be moral restrictions are gone. They're things of the past. And the things that are left behind, most people in culture kind of like, fair enough, let's keep them. And shame, the idea of shame, a human should feel shame or could feel shame. It feels like it belongs to a bygone era of penny farthing bicycles, telephones with cords and cassette tapes. Shame feels like it belongs to a world that no longer exists. And yet the reality is, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter which part of the world you're from, what culture that you've grown up in, we all feel shame. Every single one of us. Now, I want to be clear, there's a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt refers typically to a specific action that we have done that we feel is wrong. It's the uncomfortable combination of regret and an acceptance that we were responsible for that action. But shame is connected, but it's way more brutal. Because what shame says is, I haven't merely done one thing that is wrong. Shame tells me I'm all wrong. Shame tells me it's not just that action was wrong, but every part of me is wrong. It's an identity issue with shame. Shame strikes at the very heart of the person we think we are, of how we see ourselves in the world. And in a world where the moral straps have been more loosened now than ever before, we might feel that actually we feel guilty about far fewer and fewer things in our culture, yet the issue with shame is we all feel it as strong as we have ever felt it. The writer Franz Kafka, that some of you might be aware of, said, the problem that modern people have now is they feel like sinners, but they're independent of guilt. And what he means is the idea that our culture has kind of minimized and tried to get rid of guilt because we just don't think we do things wrong in the same way that we used to. And yet what Kafka says, we still feel, nonetheless, that there is something deeply wrong with us. And to make it worse, our shame that we feel, it never simply stays personal within us. Shame affects all the relationships around us. I've got a quote from Dr. Kurt Thompson. He's an expert, done lots of studies on the concept of shame, and this is what he says. What we do with shame on an individual level has potentially geometric consequences for any social systems we occupy, be that our family, place of employment, church, or larger community. In other words, his point is this: shame infects everything around us. Now, the story that we're about to look at from the Bible that Wes read to us focuses on a man called Peter. He's been away from home for the best part of 3 years. He's seen more than any fisherman of the time could imagine in the adventures that he's been on, and he returns to his home, a region called Galilee. And he comes home and he returns to his old job of fishing, but he finds himself home, but he's racked with pain. Because there was a moment in his recent past where he had an opportunity to stand up for his best friend, the best friend that he'd ever had, when his best friend really needed him. And what Peter did is Peter betrayed him, pretended that he never knew him, and Peter ghosted him. And this story is going to explore how Peter was healed of his shame, and we'll see what we can learn from it. So come with me to our second point, an overview, a context of John 21, 1 to 19. Well, the story begins in verses 1 to 3, and it all focuses around a really bad fishing trip, a fishing trip that goes terribly wrong. It's Peter, it's some of his friends, and it's a whole bunch of zero-contract-hour workers. And they've been out all night on a fishing boat, and they have caught absolutely nothing. But let me tell you this as someone who counsels people. For Peter, you can imagine that it would be better for him to have a night of fruitless fishing than a night of being alone with his own thoughts. I'm a chaplain at a gym in Manchester, and you wouldn't believe the amount of young men and women who have two choices to medicate themselves from spending time with their own thoughts. They either go to the gym or they go to the end of the bottle of alcohol. Anything not to spend time with their own thoughts. That's what shame does, and you can imagine that's the case with Peter. By verse 4, though, after a night of fruitless fishing, it's dawn breaking on the lake shore. And they're unaware that Jesus is there, and they're instead told that there's some stranger over there on the shore who's telling them to throw their nets onto the right side of the boat. In verse 6, it all breaks loose. The stretch of nets, the groaning of timbers, the thrashing of foaming of water as a shoal of fish caught in a net is writhing around on the surface of the lake. And there's frenzied shouts of fishermen calling for help to get this load of fish into the boats. Now, John, who's written this eyewitness testimony of Jesus' life, tells us in verse 11, and I want you to note this. He tells us specifically there were 153 fish. Why? Because he assumes that some of his readers who are going to get this eyewitness manuscript are going to want to check this out and validate this miracle catch for themselves. And it's at this point, in verse 7, that Peter, he realizes that the person on the shore is Jesus. And it's a fair assumption because Jesus, at the very beginning of his ministry, did exactly this miracle. Now think about it like this. If you and I had superpowers, imagine you got superpowers. I wonder what your signature superpower would be. I wonder if it would be, flight. I kind of like the idea of shooting thunderbolts from the fingertips. That would be fun, wouldn't it? What's Jesus' signature superpower move? It's having a great night fishing. Did you see that? I bet you weren't expecting to hear that from the Christian Union event, right? Actually, I wonder in verse 9 whether Jesus' special ability is actually making breakfast. Did you see that? Hasn't every friendship group got at least one person in the group who is just brilliant at cooking a really epic breakfast? Every friendship group's got someone who can do that. Now, verse 12 is arguably my favorite verse of the whole Bible. It really is. It really is. I love verse 12. But the thing with verse 12, let me say this. I'm speaking to you. If you're not a Christian, it's wonderful to have you. If you are a Christian, it's great that you're here too. But you never see Christians have this verse cross-stitched on their wall, do you? Come and have breakfast. You never see that. When was the last time you saw a Christian get this verse tattooed on them? You never see it. But it's a really wonderful verse. It's a brilliant, brilliant verse. See, this is a Valentine's offer on behalf of the Christian Union because this is my favorite verse. If you get married at some point in the future and you want this verse to be the text at your wedding that's preached on, you get in touch with me. Free of charge. I'm going to be there. You want to preach on this at your wedding? I'm going to do it. I love this verse. That is a standing Valentine's offer. There. You're glad you came, aren't you? Glad you came. Well, to these fishermen in Galilee, surely there is nothing more that feels like home than it's sunrise beside the lake and they're having breakfast. Now, this scene would be almost ideal for Peter. Breakfast beside the lake at sunrise. It'd be almost ideal for Peter if it wasn't for the fact that the guy cooking breakfast was not only a friend that he had seen killed, but also the friend that he had personally betrayed. You see, on the day that Jesus was crucified, and crucifixion at the time was a brutal, it was a tortuous death. It was so horrific, crucifixion in the first century, that it was so shameful that if you were a Roman citizen, you could not be crucified. It was that bad even for the Romans. Because crucifixion was meant to be so humiliating, so shameful, that it was designed to be a public warning to the vast slave population in the Roman Empire: don't rock the boat, stay in line. And Jesus gets crucified, hands nailed, feet nailed, basically suffocates to death in his own blood. Horrendous. And in the moment that he is most alone, and he most needs his friend to be there, Peter betrays him. 3 times Peter chose the approval of others before the friendship with Jesus. And 3 times Peter is asked if he knew Jesus, and 3 times Peter's like, no, I've got no clue who this guy is. Never seen him before in my life. You see, the breakfast on the beach in our story could be the coziest breakfast. Imagine a cozy breakfast in your kitchen, a full English sizzling away on a Saturday morning. It could be the coziest thing in the world. But actually, in our story, this breakfast does not get more awkward than this. Right in front of Peter, to his face, is Jesus. And Jesus says to Peter, Peter, do you love me? Do you love me? You could imagine the atmosphere was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. And it's worth noting, isn't it, that home isn't just where the heart is. Actually, home is the place where you have some of the most awkward conversations in your life, aren't they? In fact, a report was written, and I want to get this right, it was published, and it claimed that the average household with children has 2,184 awkward conversations per year. Wow. That is approximately, the smart ones will have already got there, that's approximately 49 minutes a day are devoted per family to awkward conversations. We get this, don't we? We get awkward conversations. we get this idea of shame. So what will happen? Well, come with me to our third point, and this zooms in to the heart of this story, God's amazing grace. Now, Jesus asks Peter the same question, do you love me? Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Now, you've got to ask, is Jesus just getting his own back on Peter? Is there somewhat a sense of kind of, sarcasm, or is Jesus being passive-aggressive? Do you really love me, Peter? Do you really? Because after what you did to me, it doesn't really look like it. No, actually, when you look at the context, it's a genuine question. Do you love me? You see, Jesus has told Peter, and he's told the disciples on at least 3 recorded occasions. He's told them that he is going to die, that he's going to choose to die. He's going to choose to go to the cross to take away their sin. That's a Bible word for all the things that they have ever done wrong or ever would do wrong. Jesus has told them 3 times that he is going to take the justice that they should have at them for all of the things that they've done wrong, all of the reasons legitimately they should feel shameful. Jesus says, look, I'm going to go to the cross to pay for it all, to wipe it away. And the idea for Peter that Jesus would choose to sacrifice himself, choose to humiliate himself, choose to be an object of shame, not because of things that he's done, but things that others have done, Peter couldn't get his head around it, didn't believe it was true. The idea that Jesus would not only die, but then be raised to life again 3 days later to prove that this forgiveness could happen, Peter couldn't get it in his mind that this was even a possibility. He did not believe it. And that's why he betrayed Jesus. Now, think about it like this. Go back to my story with my friend Chris. Remember, I given him a push, pots in the air, smash. Remember? Do you remember that one? Now, I'm hiding in my bedroom because the policeman is in my kitchen, and I'm worried I'm going to get arrested for it. That's pretty bad, but that is nothing compared with what Peter did. He betrayed his best friend. He betrayed not only his best friend, he betrayed the Son of God, who is the King of all creation, and Peter betrayed him. What would be the consequence for Peter when he meets God himself having betrayed him? What possible consequence could land on top of Peter in his moment of shame? Well, it's simply this. He meets Jesus, and Jesus makes him a slap-up breakfast on the beach at sunrise. Isn't that a shocker? Isn't that a shocker? Where's the judgment? Where's the anger? Where's the retribution? Where's the revenge? Where's the payback? Just breakfast on the beach at sunrise. Of course this is what it would be. This is exactly what Jesus said it would be. He said he was going to die on the cross and rise again so that all shame could be wiped away, so that all wrong that you and I do, all sin, that's the Bible word, could be paid for entirely, so there is no further judgment for those who trust in Jesus. So of course, it worked. Which is why when Peter meets Jesus, it's breakfast on the beach, overlooking the lake at sunrise. The word for this is grace. It's a Bible word which means an undeserved gift that God gives us. And that's what's going on here. It's almost as if this story is a worked case study. This is a laboratory moment of Does forgiveness of sin really work? Or is it a fiction? According to this passage, emphatically, it's true. And it means this. If Jesus can forgive Peter and wipe away his shame, it also means to you, whoever you are or whatever you've done, if you put your trust in Jesus, you can be forgiven as well. This is the case study to prove it. Now, do you see why Jesus asked Peter 3 times, do you love me? Because could the worst instance of shame be forgiven and the relationship with God restored? Yes. When Jesus says to Peter, do you love me? He's basically saying to Peter, Peter, do you see who I am now? Do you see what I did for you? Because if you do, if you truly see who I am and what I think about you, then your response will be to love me. So Peter, do you see who I am? Do you love me? Now there are 2 particular applications that I want to finish with today. And the first one's this. Because Jesus does change everything. The first implication is this, is to receive forgiveness. You see, if there are things in your life that fill your heart with shame, I'm talking about things, imagine there are things that you have thought or said or done, that imagine if they were projected on one of these screens around the room and everyone could see, you would just die of shame and wish the ground would open up and swallow you whole. If you have anything in your life that would make you feel like that, and my guess is we all do. The claim of Christianity is that if you want, Jesus can forgive you. And you can receive forgiveness for those things tonight. Not just the things you've done in your past, but everything that you will ever do wrong in the future. That is lavish, that is grace, an undeserved gift. Number 2. Here's the second application, is to receive purpose. Did you notice the kind of weird thing that Jesus asks Peter 3 times, do you love me, do you love me, do you love me? And each time Peter responds, yes, I love you, Jesus gives a response of something like, feed my sheep. Did you see that? It's a little bit of a weird response, isn't it? But let me give you some context. Sheep in the Bible referred to God's people. It was a symbol of God's people. And so the instruction that Peter's given every time that he responds to Jesus and says, I truly see who you are, Jesus says to him, I'm not only forgiving you, I'm also going to give you a really precious job, a really precious purpose in life. And your purpose, Peter, is I want you to look after other believers. Isn't that remarkable? He betrays Jesus, and Jesus not only forgives him, but gives him a purpose in life that is amazing. And I want you to think about that, because this is an instruction. This is a purpose that is relevant to Peter. What might it mean for you? Imagine you chose to become a Christian tonight. How might this work for you? Well, it means not only would you receive forgiveness this evening, peace with God. Wow. You would also have your life transformed. You would have your life transformed, and you would be given a purpose in life that you currently don't have, but a purpose that would transform the way that you see the world. What do I mean by that? If you become a Christian tonight, you get a new purpose. And that means your skills, your opportunities, your privileges, your time, your entire life gets reorientated, no longer just to serve yourself, but to actually honor God, to live with a purpose that, put simply, is to make this world, God's world, a better place for everyone to live in. To follow Jesus is absolutely to receive forgiveness. It's absolutely to receive a restored relationship, but it is also to receive meaning in life that you have never had. You see, many people make the mistake that being a Christian, following Jesus, leads to a narrower life, a more limited life, when in fact it gives you access to a broader life, a life with greater horizons to use your gifts and your abilities and your opportunities. Let me give you some examples. Florence Nightingale, Christian, pioneered nursing, pioneer social reformer, believer in Jesus. She said this: God called me in the morning and asked me, would I do good for him alone without reputation? That is a life that is not limited, but a life that transforms the world. That's a Christian purpose. Let's bring it home to one of your own. Isaac Newton, great scientist. The man himself said this: he who thinks half-heartedly will not believe in God, but he who really thinks has to believe in God. His endeavor was fueled by who he was in Christ. That's not a limited life. That is a purpose that changes the world. I had the opportunity to go up the tower of the chapel at John's this afternoon. My knees are still aching from it. And whilst I was kind of wheezing and trying to squeeze oxygen into my lungs at the top there and trying not to die of a heart attack, I was recalling one of that college's famous alumni, William Wilberforce, a Christian who said this: I would suggest that faith is everyone's business. The advance or decline of faith is so intimately connected to the welfare of a society that it shall be of particular interest to a politician. As many of you know, he went on to significantly campaign for the abolition of slavery. He was a Christian who had a purpose given to him that was not a more limited life, but a life with purpose that transformed the world. To follow Christ is to say yes to being transformed. But it is also to have a purpose in your life that you could never get anywhere else. You see, what then is the alternative for you? To be enslaved to selfishness? Is the purpose of your life simply to be a random collection of cells, a random collection of firing momentarily neurons that cause you to study hard for a job that pays for a house, that waits for a pension, and then eventually passes into the night? Is that what your purpose is all about? Is that the alternative that you're choosing over Christ? Surely your life must have more purpose than that. Yes, but only if you follow Jesus. You see, there's an old story. It's a story of a well-known politician, and he goes to a slave market, actually. And he sees this woman who is a slave, and she sees him, and he comes up to her, and he looks her up and down. She is seething with fury. Politician, person of power, person of influence. Such a hypocrite. He looks her up and down. He goes to the person who owns her, and he bids. He wins the bid. He pays the money. She is unlocked, and he walks off. And as he's walking away, he turns round to her and he says, "Young lady, you're free to go." She's confused and she's angry, and she goes up to him. "Well, what do you mean?" He says, I mean you're free. She's angry. She's insulted. She comes up to him a little bit closer because she's curious, and she says, does that mean I can say whatever I want to say? And he says to her, Yes, dear, you can say whatever you want to say. She steps up a little bit closer. Well, does that mean I can be whatever I want to be? She's provoking him now. He says, yes, dear, you can be whatever you want to be. She's got him with this one. Does that mean I can go wherever I want to go? And he says, yes, dear. You can go wherever you want to go. And she looks at him with tears streaming down her cheeks and says, then I want to go with you. I want to go with you. The hope of the Christian faith is that you come into a relationship with the God who loves you, who sacrificed everything to save you, and more than anything wants to be with you and give you a purpose in your life that will set you more free than you could ever imagine. So let me finish with this. An invitation has been put to every single one of us in this room. And I think there are three credible responses to what we've heard. Number one, you could turn around and you could say, actually, Matt, this is not for me. I have a more compelling vision for my life, and it is not this. Okay. Response number two that I think would be credible, you could say, actually, I've heard a lot. I'm taking this in, but I need to explore more. Okay. And number three, there's something. There's something there that leads you to say deep within, I'd like to follow Jesus. All of us will be in one of those three categories tonight. And so as you mull that over, as you ponder that, let me talk to those of you just for a moment in the third category, I'd like to follow Jesus. Look, I'm a pastor of a church. I'm in a church. What I like to do when I finish a talk back home is I like to pray. And so I'm going to say a short prayer, but I'm going to say a short prayer for you. Prayer's going to be in three parts. I'm going to say sorry to God for all that we've done wrong, all that I have done that's caused shame. I'm going to say thank you to Jesus that he died for me and gave me a new purpose for life. And I'm going to say, please, would that forgiveness and new life be applied to me tonight? So whoever you are, whichever category you're in, why don't you bow your heads and join me as we finish with a prayer. Oh, Heavenly Father, we come before you knowing that you have made this world, and we have often done things that we know to be wrong and that have filled us with shame, secrets that we have buried deeply that we cannot avoid. And we are so sorry. And yet we thank you so much that Jesus' offer as he dies and rises again is that we could be forgiven of everything we've ever done wrong and forgiven of anything that we will do wrong in the future. And we thank you for that invitation, that grace, that gift we do not deserve. And I ask for those who are ready to accept it tonight, I pray, please, would you apply that forgiveness, that new life, and that purpose to those men and women tonight. Amen. Wonderful. Well, it's been my privilege not only to speak to you tonight, and you've listened so well, and it's been just a huge thrill for me, but it's been my privilege to be with you over the course of this whole week of events. And one of the things on behalf of the Christian Union that I'd love us to do as we conclude this week is, could you just pick up these slips that are on your table? It would be immensely helpful for the Christian Union to get a sense of feedback, a sense of where you are at tonight. And I don't mind whether you are a Christian or a non-Christian or whatever you want to talk about yourself as. I'd love you to fill this in. I'd love you to say, what do you think about tonight? What do you think about these events? And is there anything that we can do to help you move forwards after this evening? There are 3 categories on the screen that I mentioned. It would be wonderful if you would note down, for you, no judgment either way, which one most applies to you. We're just going to take just a couple of minutes to fill these out. And then Wes and Imi will come back up. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for filling those in. That's much appreciated. I'd like to invite up Matthew now.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello, Matthew.
Hi.
We're going to be hearing a little bit about your story, your testimony. But first of all, maybe quickly you could tell us who you are, what you're studying.
Okay. I'm Matthew. I'm a second year at Christ. I'm studying law. I'm a Pisces. Sierra SID MR994. I live on St. Andrew Street. If you think you don't like hearing more about me, I think this is not the place to be. I think.
No, I'm sure. Matthew, we're going to hear a little bit about your testimony now, and I'll hand over to you now.
Amazing.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm not that great at public speaking, and that's why I've prepared this. But if I would get, I have a favor to ask you, which is to minimize the eye contact. That would help the nerves a lot. If I catch a gaze for more than 3 seconds, I'm going to burst out in tears, and that's not good for anyone. Okay. So before I start, I'd like to issue a content warning. My testimony isn't special at all. Firstly, as you've probably guessed, the ending, I became a Christian. I'm afraid there are no points for that. But you might be surprised to know that I became one at Events Week just last year. And how that happened might leave a sliver of intrigue. So I remember sitting there at HT, tearing up at Alex Stevenson's testimony. And you'd be glad to know that comparatively, I take quite little pleasure in inducing tears. Mostly because using up tissues is not good for the planet. It's 2025. That is also to say that this story might be slightly boring. In this story, there are no visions or miracles or dragons or puppies. I came to faith largely through thinking about things. And what I'd like to do, instead of inducing tears, is inducing some thoughts. But fear not, if I sense a growing disinterest, I have here the first section of the Gruffalo, which I'm happy to recite instead. So I grew up going to church. My parents are Christians, but when I was 12 and started questioning things, I began to doubt a lot of what I believed. When I asked these questions to people at church, I didn't feel like I had my questions answered, or that people were particularly pleased that I was asking these questions. So I stopped going to church and didn't think about bigger questions for the next few years. So fast forward to Cambridge, these big questions were out of my mind. The world was my oyster, and Cambridge was a wonderful place to be. I think it still is. My job was to get good grades, to get a good job, to live a good life. I stayed in Cambridge last winter, camping the library to get internship applications done. I like that laugh. I thought starting university would bring me satisfaction, but it just becomes the new normal. I put in the hard work to get here, and now there's the careers mountain to climb. I pictured myself in 10 years having maybe a cushy lawyer job, and wondered if I'd actually be any happier. I'm not sure if any one of you would relate to this. And actually, during the 10th application, your eyes start drifting. I saw a book on the shelf titled Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari and started reading it. Essentially, the author applies quite a skeptical view towards the human condition, attributing everything, morality, religion, feelings, to evolution. And I was convinced, so convinced that in my already existential mood, I thought I should take the skepticism to its natural conclusion. I wanted to believe the truth, and the truth is whatever which is objectively verifiable. And to me, that was the material world. There's a well-worn joke that we can't trust atoms because they... No one? Make everything up. You're not a very well-humored crowd. But that's true. If I wanted to be honest with my atheism, this is what I believe. Thinking this way, I'd warn you, it's quite scary. Our minds would be nothing but chemical impulses firing in quick succession, according to the laws of nature and the initial conditions of the universe. Well, this throws so much into question. Human worth, for instance, is quite hard to explain. What makes this arrangement of atoms different, worth more of protection than that? Not pointing at you, Sophia, the table, sorry. Sophia looked very offended. Be careful around her. But perhaps more terrifyingly, I found free will inexplicable. We know that atoms don't have free will and blindly follow their courses. So if we feel like we're making free choices, that's just because the electrical impulses in our brain are producing the illusion that we are. I tried my best to find my ways out of these issues, and you bet I tried, but I couldn't. For instance, you could try to argue that we live in a probabilistic universe, and so our actions are not determined. Well, but this, chair, is also governed by the same rules of quantum physics, and we wouldn't say that it has free will. So I told myself, right, I wanted to live honestly, and tried to live as if materialism were true. And I can assure you again, it's depressing. I would highly encourage you, I think, to try this, but I'm aware it's the middle of Lent, and maybe wait for brighter days. Or perhaps book yourself a flight to Spain before you try. I did it over the Christmas break last year, and basically lay in bed for 3 days. Not believing that there's such thing as yourself, or that you have free will, makes it surprisingly hard to live life. And after those 3 days, I knew that I couldn't live like a materialist. I considered agnosticism, the belief that there might be something out there, but we can never know. But I thought, how can we know that we can't know it? Well, picture this. I say that I'm agnostic about whether the earth is flat or round. Someone asks, have you checked the evidence? And I say, well, no, but I can be sure that there's no evidence out there. I thought this was quite a compromised position. So I made it a point to start searching for things. My first port of call was not church, it was Reddit. As with everything, I think. To be honest, church might just be the last place I would have looked. I thought I'd opened the box when I was a kid, and saw nothing in it, and closed it. But it was the persistent invitation of someone I met at rowing which convinced me to come. Well, the first day at church started out as quite the nightmare. I was somehow, but not too unsurprisingly knowing me, baited to stay on by free lunch. The student pastor decided to sit next to me. But what surprised me was how eager he was to know where I was coming from. It was just like a big questions chat that I'd have with my neighbors at the JIP. So I enjoyed this conversation, and it was much more fruitful than scrolling through r/nihilism or thinking about it in my bed at night. And don't assume I was bought over immediately. At this point, I was still an art skeptic. As a law student, I quite enjoyed disagreements. So I thought I had some fun trying to convince Christians that they're wrong. But I quickly realized that in a place like Cambridge, many Christians would have thought about the same questions that I have before, and many of them had better answers, being subject matter experts. Not only that, but I realized what I thought Christianity was completely wrong. I thought it was a religion about doing good things, but soon I was corrected. Well, I thought if I were truly to reject Christianity as an option, it would be fair to understand it first. And so I read the Bible and other books about it. What eventually convinced me of Christianity was the historical evidence for Jesus' life. I started with the facts both secular and Christian historians would agree on. There was this guy called Jesus who said a lot of things, and this got him crucified. I then thought about the resurrection, which is where they differ. Well, if this is true, it changes everything. The facts are that Jesus was buried, and the movement started by the eyewitnesses started to grow rapidly, converting the Roman Empire within 3 or 4 centuries. And I'd encourage you to think about what your best explanation for this evidence is. Were the disciples hallucinating? Did they steal the body? What pushed me over the line was the fact that early Christians, including the disciples, were the first eyewitnesses of Jesus' risen body, started dying for their faith in the most terrible ways you can imagine. Why would they do this for something that they knew was a lie? After all, Christianity is not a religion where suffering for the faith gives you a special reward in the afterlife. Another thing that pulled me over is how radical Christianity is from other belief systems. In practically every other past civilization, the view is that might makes right. The Romans prided themselves in massacre and exposing babies to die. It's Jesus who comes up with the philosophy of turning the other cheek and laying your life down for your friends. I'd encourage you to read what Jesus said and think how probable it is for an unschooled carpenter in a Roman backwater town could have come up with this. The question, with all other historical questions, should be, what is the best explanation for these facts? And I thought that this was such a countercultural belief system to have even been made up. And this was key. At the heart of the Christian message is a peculiar but beautiful blend of justice and love. We would never let wrongs be unpunished. And if I looked into my own heart and the thoughts I'd never let anyone else know about, I am quite a wretch. That would be an understatement. Eternal life and a relationship with God is the last thing I deserve. But because God loves me, he sent his son to die on the cross, bearing the punishment for my sin. Well, this is profound philosophy. It seems to me that the only solution to meld the two central human longings of justice and love is found here. Philosophers are often influenced by others who've gone before or by other cultural forces around. And there was nothing in Jesus' time or in any other time that would suggest that God dying for humans was the answer. I think Christianity is a religion that demands explanation. Of course, even after investigating the Christian faith, I felt that my mind was not yet made up. I had 101 more questions to ask, but it was an Events Week talk last year, right here, and I remembered hearing that sitting on the fence is not an option. So I prayed a prayer that I still do now, which is taken from the book of Mark. It's from this man who just saw Jesus heal his son. And it was, I believe, help my unbelief. And I asked God to show himself to me. And that night, walking back to college, there was an inexpressible warmth, that's a long word, peace and joy, which I've never experienced before. And I think what I've learned living as a Christian for a year is that it's so hard. Jesus calls us to deny ourselves every day and carry our own crosses. If you think Christians do it because it makes life easier, I can confidently say that it's not true. But it's so much more joyful. We have a personal relationship with God, the creator of the universe, and not through our work, but by Jesus's. Practically speaking, in Cambridge terms and in this stage that people call early adulthood, this means rest. That we're not measured by our achievements and that trusting that God has a plan for us. One of my favorite verses in the Bible, although Matt might have convinced me otherwise, but it's hard to beat this one, so I would suggest it to you too. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you would find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. What a great promise. And as a bonus, the Christian community has just been wonderful. I've made my closest friends in my life here, but I also know that I have a family anywhere else in the world. I like to say, if you need a friend, church is a good place to go. It's pretty much a self-selecting group of nice people, I hope, or at least people who realize that they're not nice enough so as to need forgiveness. And to wrap up, I'm not sharing this to prove you wrong or because evangelism gives me brownie points with God. I found such a glorious treasure that I want you to have it too. So I'd encourage you to do 3 things. Firstly, think of what your current worldview is. What do you think is real? Now apply the same level of questioning to this worldview that you would to Christianity and see if you can live by it. Secondly, consider the historical claims of the Bible, and better still, read what Jesus said himself. The Bible is open source, so I don't see much trouble in doing that at all. Lastly, ask difficult questions to Christians. I can assure you that your Christian friends enjoy it. Make them uncomfortable. The more uncomfortable, the better. It'll give me great joy. And I also, to end, since it's the last day of Events Week, have a special announcement, which I heard from Kiku. If you manage to prove your Christian friend wrong, you get a Revs ticket. And if you manage to prove the church vicar wrong, you get a free trip to Spain. Is that right, Max? Do we have leftover budget from Events Week? And so for legal reasons, this is a joke. Or in law, we would call it a puffery. So it's either eternal life on one hand or Spain on the other. And so there's no reason to not start thinking. Okay, that's it.
Oh, thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, so now we're going to go into a time of discussion where you can talk to the people around you on your tables about what we've heard tonight from Matt's talk, but also from Matthew's story. And we've also got our response cards, so if you haven't already, we'd love it if you could fill it in with your thoughts about the events this week. Do you want to introduce prayer?
Yes, so if you're wanting, if anything's touched you from any of the talks, maybe even tonight, something stuck with you, or maybe thinking through those different categories, maybe you're one of the people who wants to know more, or perhaps even wants to follow Jesus for the first time, we would love to pray with you. And we've got some people in home jumpers just at the back there, they're just waving now. They would love to come alongside you, to pray with you or for you. Nothing's too small to go and be prayed for. So do go over to them if that's something that you'd like to do.
And we'll have Matt's points of reflection on the screens just to remind you. Do get chatting.